And I'll just say a few words about Lowlinc for those of you who aren't familiar with us. We are a nonprofit here at the lake, a nonprofit membership organization that provides services to seniors so they can remain in their homes. So things such as transportation, light home maintenance, computer support, errands, those kinds of things we do provide. Oh, transportation, did I mention that? That's a big one. And so if you're interested in membership or volunteering, that would be great. You can speak to me, or we have a number of board members here. We have some of our members here that you can talk to, as well as some volunteers. And we're happy to tell you about it. If you're interested also, you can go to our website, www.lowlinc.org. So that's another place. Welcome.
Thank you.
Appreciate you.
Hello.
Hello.
I'm here.
So I just want to mention, we just published our annual report, and we have a couple extra copies here if anybody's interested. And you can also access the annual report on our website, again, lowlinc.org. And so Walt is taping this, and the reason we're doing this is hopefully to put this presentation up on Channel 18 so that a broad audience can see it, because we have an excellent speaker today. So I'd like to introduce Kathy Jensen. Kathy is organizing the speaker series this year, and she will introduce our speaker.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm so glad that it wasn't just Andy and I here this morning. It would have been embarrassing. Our guest speaker for today is no stranger to us, but he does deserve a proper introduction. As Orange County residents, we are very fortunate to have Lee Freem serving as our District 5 Orange County Supervisor. Lee is a graduate of the University of Michigan, is a retired Navy captain, and has served as a commander of a nuclear submarine. He spent 30 years on active duty. The last 7 years in the Pentagon, and then went on to spend another 11 years as a civil servant in the Pentagon, with one assignment placing him in the White House. So all that tells us he's pretty smart. Did you write this? No, he didn't. And he does care deeply about Lake of the Woods, having lived here for 17 years with his wife, Sandy. He's right back there. They've been married for 57 years.
Blush should go for her.
It did. Oh, what does Lee do in his spare time? Well, I know he's not a bad bowler. But to name a few other things, he has served as president of the Lake of the Woods Board of Directors, was one of the founders of our Veterans Club, is an active member of our rescue squad, so take a look at him, and has enjoyed many colorful roles, many colorful characters with the Lake of the Woods players. It is my pleasure to present our Orange County Supervisor, Lee Freem.
Thank you, Kathy.
You're welcome.
I'm afraid the introduction is a little bit longer than my speech. First of all, I would like to thank Lowlinc as an organization for doing what you do in Lake of the Woods and doing it for the citizens of my district. I appreciate that. I recognize how important that function is, and I really thank you all who are working to make this go. Now, as I move through this, I would prefer that people ask questions when they come up. I know that there's a few enough people here that it's not going to drag things out. So if you've got questions, please make them known at the time you have them. I'm here today to talk about the county's emergency operations plan. One of the interesting things when I come to give a talk, I usually do a little more research and look up this thing, and we approved this plan back in 2015. It's about 200 pages. I'm not sure I read it all that carefully when we signed it, when we approved it. because I have been looking at it thoroughly now, and I found a number of things that said, they probably ought to be changed. And so I've actually got myself a list of about 6 or 7 things that we need to look at to make sure that the system is working. Now, it's an extensive document. It's got 15 emergency support functions, 7 annexes, and 40 appendices.
What does that mean?
The emergency support functions are the basic areas of what we actually do in the thing. The annexes, let's see, emergency support functions dealing with transportation, communications, management, public works, firefighting, care of people en masse, public health, public safety, logistics, long-term recovery. Those are the basic functions to make sure that the emergency plan goes. There's 7 annexes dealing with such things as hazardous material, resource shortages, radiological, dam safety, nuclear attack, terrorism. A little more detail in that, but again, back to the 15 emergency support functions. That's the primary driver of the thing. Now, the 40 appendices, they deal with such things as the definitions and the reports and the forms and the various types of things. One of the interesting forms I found in there was a waiver form. You know, if we decide we need to take an area and evacuate it because it's got problems and people want to get back into it, we make them sign a waiver knowing that they're going into a risky area. But anyway, there's just a whole bunch of things. Layouts of the shelters, layout of the schools, what we would do with volunteers, things like that. One of the things that you need to think about as we talk about emergency plans is much of this is an extension of what we do on a day-to-day basis. We have emergencies all the time. Somebody has a heart attack. The house starts burning. There's a fuel oil spill because some vehicle had an accident. So there's a whole range of emergencies that occur all the time on a routine basis. And what we do is we handle them with our the Sheriff's Department, the fire and rescue companies, the volunteers, and those are the ones that basically deal with that on a day-to-day basis. The emergency plan deals with this, extending that to a wider series of situations. Now, we've had times when we've had to augment people in the 911 center, people bring in some extra firefighters from other adjacent counties on part of mutual aid agreements. We have had situations like that we haven't actually had to declare an emergency, but we in fact did have to augment our normal day-to-day operations. A declaration of emergency is made by the Director of Emergency Services, who is the Chairman of the Board of Supervisors. Now, I've had been Chairman about 5 years overall, and I think maybe there's twice that I've actually had to declare an emergency. One of the reasons we declare an emergency, and if it's declared by the chairman, it gets to be backed up by a resolution of the entire board. But what that does is that sets into position the ability to recover the costs of an emergency. So almost every place you see in all these various support functions, we've got somebody recording all the costs. If I have to bring in a lot of extra people on overtime, that's a cost. If I have to go out and buy emergency supplies, that's a cost. There's a whole range of costs. And there are different federal funds that are available to recoup some of those costs, especially if you get a declaration of an emergency by the state or the president. So those are things that we keep track of with the declaration. We operate the emergency plan out of our Emergency Operations Center, which is in the basement of the Gordon Building in the town of Orange. That's right adjacent to the 911 center. Now, the county is in the process of getting ready to move those. Right now, they're all in a basement down below ground level, so that if we have a good flood in the town of Orange, we lose our Emergency Operations Center, we lose our 911 center, and that's where all of our computer servers are located. So we are planning, as a part of a $26 million bond issue, to build a new Emergency Operations Center out near the airport. So that's just one of the things we've got going on. Now, the county, when we have the Emergency Operations Center, depending upon the extent of the emergency, we can have as few as 5 people and as many as 26. You can see when we have to fund up 26 people, that's a lot of overtime, because the people that would be doing this are people who are already mostly already county employees, and would be coming in on extra time. One of the things you need to think about for your volunteer fire department, your employees that are paid by the county, that we've got a widespread emergency. Many of them have to come in and help support fighting that emergency. At the same time, they got families and homes that they need to worry about. So think very highly of these guys who are leaving their homes, their families, and moving to support the county and make things happen on a normal basis. Now, what's going to happen at the Emergency Operations Center? Well, as I said, the chairman of the Board of Supervisors is the Director of Emergency Services. No way do I want to be in charge of the Emergency Operations Center. The head of our Fire and EMS department is the coordinator of emergency operations, and he's the guy who actually runs things there. In a serious casualty, they probably would require the chairman there, because he's got to make some decisions that have to elevate up to his level. The principal thing that the county is doing is fighting the casualty. If we've got a large area fire, if we've got a chemical spill, if we've got a huge traffic accident that's gotten into some of these propane trucks or things like that. So the primary focus is fighting the casualty. And that's, there'll be an on-scene commander, and he communicates through our 911 center to the Emergency Operations Center, which are right beside each other. The on-scene commander can say, well, I need 3 more fire companies to come in and help. Or we've got 30 people who are injured, and we need to bring in not only all of the fire and rescue, all of the ambulances that the county has, but we also need to be requesting mutual aid from some of the adjacent people. We may need to go to the state for additional resources. So part of what is going on in the Emergency Operations Center is focusing on all those things. They liaison with the state. If we have, which means I need more people on phones to talk to the state. It's just not a matter of, if our phones are down, we've got to use our radios. So there's a major area of concern there. The county is trying to restore services. Roads are blocked. We've got electricity that's down. A lot of areas don't have electricity. And part of the Emergency Operations Center, although they're not doing it, they're working with the various Rapidan Electric or Rappahannock Electric or any of the other companies trying to get services restored, and they're helping to prioritize which areas need the services. For instance, I'm more familiar with Rapidan Service Authority because I'm on their board. But one of the interesting things as I started looking into this was, Okay, if we lose all power, you still have water. No problems. Sewer's another problem. I've got 13 sewer pump stations here in the lake, and if I lose power, they can no longer maintain, vacuum, and pull the stuff out of the tanks around your house and pump it over to the sewage plant. What we do have is on every one of the pump stations, got a little plug on the outside where I can bring up a portable generator and operate that thing for a while. So we know, we've planned for that. But there's also another pump station down at the bottom of the dam, and that's got a generator of itself. So if we lose power, that system is okay. So I asked the head of the general manager of RSA the other day, said, what happens if the dam breaks and that blows all that stuff away? We'll still have water. But how are we gonna get rid of these things? I mean, the generator, the pumps, it's all gone. And he said, that's an interesting question. So he is meeting with people, I think, the day after tomorrow to say, how would we do that? Apparently there are such things as diesel-driven pumps and things that they could tie into that. But, you know, have they identified where they can get the pumps so they can get them as quickly as we can clear that? If there's a whole bunch of debris down there, can I even actually get down to those lines and put those pumps in place? So there's interesting things like that, and I'm sure that the telephone company and the electric company have similar kinds of problems. The Emergency Operations Center coordinates with other different entities that are help out. The public health, the schools, the Red Cross, VDOT. If we have a big storm and a lot of our trees are down blocking roads, VDOT has a responsibility to clear them. Within the lake, the association management and the association maintenance has that, plus the fire departments. All of the fire trucks got chainsaws on them, and so a combination of VDOT, Lake of the Woods Association, volunteer fire departments across the county would help to get roads cleared.
Hey, Lee.
Yes.
Just a quick question. During that big microburst that we had, I guess like a couple months ago, I noticed that there's a lot of the big electrical companies out there handling a lot of that stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, I didn't see necessarily a lot of stuff with beat on it.
If we've got trees, they're pull down power lines, fire department's not going to get involved, VDOT's not going to get involved. We don't do that until the Rappahannock Electric has gotten over there and made sure that all that's safe before they start doing that. So that's, yeah. REC is sometimes involved with that, mainly because a lot of the trees are leaning on, you know. I had one situation where we were driving a patient to the hospital, and we were out Route 3 was all screwed up, and we were on one of the back roads in Spotsylvania County, and there's this tree sitting across the road like this, and the ambulance would run about this far. So we had 3 people on the ambulance in addition to the patient. So 2 of us got out and we pushed the tree up as far so that the ambulance could make it by, but that was an unusual circumstance.
Yeah.
The other things happening out of the Emergency Operations Center is public information. We need to make sure that the public knows of the situation when an emergency arises, and as the emergency is being dealt with, keeping people informed is a critical part of this. Last thing I need is, 5,000 phone calls coming into the Emergency Operations Center. If we have to evacuate, that's one of the things that a decision is made by the, in this case, the Director of Emergency Operations. Be a chairman of the Board of Supervisors would have to make that decision to evacuate. That would be based on the recommendation of all the other people involved. Evacuations,
Where would we be evacuated to?
That's my next subject.
Okay.
I actually reversed that because I thought, we would be evacuating to shelters. Now, we have, so if a determination is made, we've got to evacuate this part of Lake of the Woods because of a chemical spill out on Route 3, then we would end up having to open a shelter and to move people from that area to the shelter. The shelters are the schools. One of the difficult aspects of our shelters in the county is none of them have generators. As long as we've got power, those shelters work fine, but we don't have power for the schools. If we use, let's say, the fire or rescue station as a temporary shelter, and we don't have much capacity there, those do have generators. One of the things I was thinking about is there a way of hooking up, putting a plug like I've got on the pump stations, that I could bring a large portable generator and plug it in so that I could keep the school running. Those are things that I've got on my list of things to look up after I the shelters, again, we have not, to my knowledge, opened any of the main shelters. We had a period a few years ago where in the town of Orange, they actually opened up the rescue station for some people for a few hours. I don't think they kept them overnight, but to give them some respite from the cold that they had at the time. Now, our shelters don't have a lot of resources for taking care of people. Or we would depend primarily on the American Red Cross. The Red Cross actually has a trailer down in Orange with bunks and blankets and things like that. But if we operate a shelter, the predominant number of people that are going to be taking care of that is the American Red Cross. Now, if there's any need for medical treatment in those things, we will have to rely either on our EMTs in the county, or we would bring in, there are some other organizations, Public Health has access to organizations that can do this. I always get concerned about cramming a lot of people into a shelter, and especially in a situation like today where we have so many people with serious cases of flu. So I can imagine crowding a whole bunch of people in there with flu. I think we would probably end up, if I were in charge of the medical on there, I'd make sure that anybody who's got a temperature or sneezing is wearing a mask, just to be able to keep that up. But those are the kind of things you need to deal with.
Lee,
Yes,
is there any consideration for pets in evacuation?
that's my next
Oh,
thing. As I was reading the information on our evacuation, it tells people, okay, bring a blanket, a sleeping bag, bring your medications. If you got babies, bring all their baby food and you know, diapers and all the other stuff. And turn off all your utilities in the house and leave your pets. I don't think that's going to happen.
No.
I mean, you know, it's one thing if you're just leaving the house because it's cold and you can put the puppy under the blankets and let him, but if you're talking about, yeah, we've got a chemical spill that's enveloping the community, or there's fire moving through the community. Our experience based on some of the major casualties we've had around the country is, you know, is Fluffy is going with us. So that's another one of the things that I've got to figure out how to deal with, because I don't think people are going to leave their pets.
I know in Madison, in some of the evacuations that they have had, they've had some of the local organizations who come in with carts and things,
Well,
crates.
we have an animal shelter in the county, and so, but I didn't see anything in the emergency plan for the animal shelter people to pony up any of their services. So that's another one of the things that's on my list to look at.
But if they're out of electricity and water, they can't help either.
Well, that's true, yeah. So that's all part of what we need to look at in terms of how much, you know, a lot of this is how much, yeah, it'd be very nice if every school had a generator.
Yeah.
But the cost of buying and continuing to maintain a generator is not insignificant. And I'm not sure that the county is willing to do that. I mean, in my 10 years, we have not had to open a school for an emergency, and buying a generator for something that's going to happen every 20 years just doesn't happen. But my thoughts are that if I can wire the school such that I can bring a generator in and plug it in, because you can hire, you know, RSA has done that. We've got their own generators. They brought in one on one of the power outages. They just hired a generator, plugged it in, left it there full time. Now, there are limits on what the county can do to directly assist the residents. I've got Sheriff's Department, I've got probably 5 or 6 county ambulances and a couple of volunteer ambulances. And if we had an emergency, I'm sure I could staff all of those. And I've got the fire departments who could staff their fire apparatus to be able to help people. But there isn't a lot of capacity to help individuals. Probably 80 to 90% of the people, if we have an evacuation or have a problem, are able to take care of themselves. What the county's really concerned about is their vulnerable population. And I know Lowlinc is dealing with that. One of the interesting things I found in the emergency operations plan was that the Department of Social Services is supposed to keep a roster of everybody who has special needs.
Oh my gosh.
They have absolutely no capacity to do that. I called the new director of social services about a month after she got into office and said, where's her list of all the people in the county that need special services? You know, I got this reserve salute. So it became very evident that that was a serious deficiency, at least in the plan. Now, we do have some resources for doing that. We have in the county a smart 911 system and a rave alert system, in which you can go online and put your name, your family, your household, the circumstances in your house online, so that's available in the case of a casualty. Now, on a day-to-day basis, you know, if you have you know, somebody who's bedridden up in the right-hand corner upstairs bedroom and can't move him, and you don't have the capacity to move that person, that's something that you can tell the county, and that becomes part of the information that the county has, and they can call up that information and say, okay, looking in this area, I've got these 15 people that have problems, and we need to deal with them. One of the things, some of the things that you can put in this is, do you have transportation? Do you have access to it? Do you need assistance to use transportation? Is there a situation with domestic violence? Do we need to be looking at that? Are there some medical issues? Do you have a lot of tubes, implants, oxygen? Are you blind? You can't hear? Sensory impairment? What are those kinds of things? Do you have mobility issues? Can you move around? Do we have a member with psychiatric problems in the thing? Do you have a need for electrical power? There are a lot of people on home oxygen, and they have a little generator in their house that's providing that oxygen. Well, if you lose power, you're losing that oxygen. Those things become important. I had a lady call me 2 days ago. And she said that she had an autistic child. And the autistic child has grown up enough that she no longer keeps her in her bedroom. She's got her in another bedroom. But she keeps it locked at night because the child was likely to wander off. Well, that's something she wants the fire department to know about. And so I steered her on to the Smart 911 Rave Alert system, and that enabled them to be able to make the necessary, provide the necessary information. Now this applies not only for a widespread emergency situation. If you have specific medical conditions and you have called 911, we can actually get that information to the EMT that's en route to your house before he gets to your house. So that Smart 911 is available. The Rave Alert is something we can tap into to determine what people need if I have an emergency situation, and let's say the Lake of the Woods half near Route 3, I've got people that I need to evacuate, and which people there need help. So that's one of the things. Now, even for people that are healthy and physically can handle themselves, I think they should be signed up for Rave Alert. Because if you're living somewhere near Route 3, and we have a big chemical spill go out there, and it's 3 o'clock in the morning, would you be glad to just sleep through that as the fumes drift past your house? Absolutely not. So you can get a phone call, you can get a text message, you can get an email, you can get any of those things by signing up for Rave Alert. So even if you're not interested in telling about your medical devices, your medical history, I think everybody should be signed up just so that they can be alerted to any kind of a medical situation, any kind of an emergency.
How do you sign up for your
I have a bunch of these, and you can pick them up, and it says exactly how to go about it.
Great.
For those people who don't have a computer, I look to maybe some of the faith-based or community-based organizations to try to help people get signed up, because they may have a phone, a cell phone, a regular phone, any of those things. So even though they may not be able to enter that into the computer themselves, enter it into the county's information system, they would still have that information available to them so that they can get the information of the alerts. Yes?
If we find ourselves in a situation where we do not have phone, power, internet, how does the county get word out to us? Is there like an AM station that we're supposed to tune to?
Any kind of a situation, in addition to using these systems here, we will go to all the radio stations, TV stations. That's a normal part of our public information thing. But so, you know, if you've got an emergency radio, that's possible. Keep your cell phones charged. Yes?
I have an emergency radio that you just wind it if the power goes out, and I know it's just where it is, it's bright yellow, you can get them online.
They're not very expensive.
No, they're not expensive at all.
Yes?
In the case of a chemical spill, is there a differentiation between a really nasty thing or a gas truck that rolls over on Route 3? Because I know they have to close the road and go.
When somebody gets there and we get an initial report, and we said, okay, this is a big chlorine tank. We don't know whether it's got a leak or not.
Yeah,
But the on-scene commander comes back to the 911 center and says, hey, there's no leak, but I do need fire department to protect the area, or we're not sure if there's a leak.
right.
Okay, so then it becomes the decision of the on-scene commander and the emergency operator. In this case, on a normal basis at the 911 center, is this serious enough? And it'd probably be the county's fire and EMS duty officer would say, let's evacuate, or no, we don't evacuate.
No, I'm thinking about the rave alert.
Yeah, The rate alert would come in when a decision is made that this is a dangerous situation.
Okay, so to be honest, I don't want to be woken up if the gas truck rolls over. Because I've seen that happen on Route 29 so
Sure.
many
No,
times.
I mean, that's,
You didn't wake up then?
somebody has
Yeah, they have a
to,
record.
before we initiate the rate alert system, somebody has to make a decision that
Okay.
this is an emergency, requires alerting people.
Thank you.
One of the other possibilities, of course, is we would be notifying Lake of the Woods Association. And Lake of the Woods Association also has their common contact system to alert people as well. So there's a variety of techniques. Okay. When it comes to recovery, there is a lot of funding available if it's a major casualty. There's funding available through FEMA and through other federal programs to provide information such that people can, your house has been swept away in a flood. There's opportunities for, let's say, up to a year of rent. Funding to help get the thing restored. So there's a lot of funding available for individuals, including even as much as, hey, my workplace is down the drain, and there's possibility for unemployment help in that area to give somebody some income that they're doing. So that's one of the areas. Plus, as I say, we keep track of everything we do to make sure that, if we had to go out and buy a lot of supplies to help fight a casualty, or I had to put, 30 people on overtime for 3 days, there are funds to come back and help the county either restore its functions, replace buildings that have been destroyed. So there's a variety of things. So one of the things we're doing all along is we're keeping close records of everything we do. One thing I wanted to talk about is volunteers and donations. I can see a situation where people decide, okay, hey, we've had a lot of people's homes destroyed. And so all of a sudden donations start piling in, clothing, stuff like that. That's a disaster almost. I have been down at remote area medical down in Wise County the last few years. And for the 3,000 or so people that come there requiring medical services and help, the local churches have provided a lot of clothing. It's a full semi of bagged clothing. But those people have done a lot of sorting in advance, and there's probably 8 or a dozen people making sure that it's laid out such that people can get at it. But I've seen situations where all you got is just bags of clothing, half of which should have gone into the compactor. So making donations is a shaky event. It needs to be coordinated, it needs to be planned. Volunteers. The last thing we need is 50 people showing up at the emergency center. I'm willing to help, what can you do? What am I willing to let you do? I mean, I can see a guy, hey, I got a 4-wheel drive and 3 of us all got chainsaws and we're willing to go out and clean and clear roads. Well, these guys really know what they're doing, or they're a bunch of Paul Bunyan wannabes. So, this is a part of managing it. Because if I say, okay, I'm going to put those guys in service, and they screw up, hurt themselves, hurt somebody else, the county's now involved. If, let's say, a guy sees 2 houses down the road, there's a tree across the road, he gets a couple of his neighbors, they take a chainsaw, they pull it out of the way, that's fine. Same thing, you look at maybe a firefighting going on. There is a house burning down, firefighters are fighting it in cold weather, and one of the next door neighbors comes out with a pot of cocoa and a bunch of styrofoam cups. That's great. Now, she goes walking in there and saying, try to do this and do this, you know, and getting interfering with all the firefighters trying to do the thing, you know, that's not so good. She stands off here by the side saying, hey, I've got it. You guys can come over and get it. That's the kind of volunteerism that can be helpful. So, again, when you begin to think about volunteerism or donations, all of these need to be better planned and use some common sense in that. I think that's pretty much all I've got to say about the emergency plan. Are there any questions? Yes?
I've heard about some areas that had a problem and found out about it in an emergency, and the coordination between volunteer organizations. They discovered that the radios of the fire department and the rescue squad and the sheriff's department couldn't talk to each other. Is that something that's been coordinated in Orange County?
We're part of that $26 million bond issue is buying a new communication system for the entire county. We've got sheriffs who are in some parts of the county, they're inside a building, they can't communicate.
Right.
Nobody can hear them. They can't hear the 911 center. We have just finished combining the sheriff's and the fire and rescue's dispatch. They're now all in one area. Save us some time. Also, a little bit better coordination where you need to have both sides working. But yeah, the sheriffs can talk to our 911 center. Our 911 center can talk to the on-scene commander. So there is, I would say, pretty good, not excellent, the new communication systems we were doing, and that's going to be pretty expensive. Not only new pagers, new portable radios, but we have to integrate them into all the fire trucks, ambulances, sheriff's deputies' cars, all those things, and that's a big expense. So, but those new communication systems will have the option of being able to talk to the state, talk to a whole variety of people. We'll have to have procedures. I just don't want everybody calling the state. I don't even really want the on-scene commander calling the state. I want him to go through the emergency operations center. Yes?
Is that bond issue something that's going to happen soon, I hope?
Bond issue's already been, we already have the money.
Oh, okay.
So when is all this gonna start, all these improvements?
Well, we have actually started some work with the fiber optics.
Yeah.
Because what we're doing is we're coordinating our emergency communications, new emergency operations center out there near the airport, and trying to provide broadband throughout the county. These are all three initiatives going on in coordination simultaneously.
Hey, Lee?
Yes.
Is that the thing where they're running the fiber optics from Gordonsville all the way up to Locust Grove Middle School?
That's right.
Okay.
And there's been some glitches with that. We got the grant like 6 hours before the deadline to grant it. We know that this current head of the Federal Communications System does not like that ECC system that grants us that money. So we have had the grant, but as we're trying to get reimbursement for it, there's either computer glitches or personnel glitches or something like that. So we haven't been able to get our reimbursements, and we have gone to our congressmen and our senators saying, hey, you know, there's a problem. But it's being held up for that. But we do have all that. We will be issuing an RFP for the towers that we need to build throughout the county that'll provide our radio communications. Now, the radio communication is not going to be just for fire and rescue and the sheriff, but also picks up the school buses and a whole range of others.
Sounds expensive.
Yes?
Do you know if there's any plans to get a sheriff's office up at this end of Orange County?
No. There are none.
That was pretty fast.
No, you don't.
No, I mean, I've talked to the sheriff about that. If I gave him the extra money, he'd put more people on the road. He would not put another substation down there. Yes.
Okay, let's say we have a tremendous thunderstorm and lightning hits 3 or 4 homes.
Mhm,
So we have maybe 10 houses on fire.
mhm.
Tell me what would happen with this, with our system beginning to end?
If we had,
Okay.
okay, we have, let's say, 10 houses on fire throughout the county.
No,
Okay.
I'm talking
No,
about
here.
Lake of the Woods.
Oh, Lake of the Woods,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm concerned
10
about-
10 houses, okay. First of all, our local fire department would respond, and depending on the availability of the other fire companies in the county, they would all come here, okay. If that's not enough, we would be asking Spotsylvania for help. That's and that's not necessarily, we haven't gotten to the stand of setting up the emergency operations center or declaring an emergency yet. We're just responding normal augmented. If we saw that the fire was spreading beyond these houses, we might very well declare an emergency and then be asking for help from the state.
Okay, but what about the people that are in these homes? Where do they go? This fire is going, is there going to be a place that they can go? It would be nice if there was a building or
Again, we had this last weekend, we had a house burned down, and the American Red Cross was there to help that family. If we ended up now with, let's say, a dozen homes that have to be we would be contacting the American Red Cross, and whether or not they would decide that they would want to set up an emergency shelter to provide for them, or does the American Red Cross come down there and say, this family, you go to that motel, you go to that hotel? Again, that would be depending upon, if we were evacuating half of Lake of the Woods because there were a lot of fires here, then we more likely set up a shelter.
Is there any way to have a shelter within Lake of the Woods?
What's that?
Could this be a shelter?
Again, when I talked to the general manager this morning, I got the impression he didn't want to get into the shelter business. Would it be possible, I think, to say, okay, it's the thunderstorm, yeah, well, your house is burning, but, it might bring you here. We might very well, the Emergency Operations Center may call the general manager and say, can they come over here and stay here? Now, nobody's going to set up bunks here, nobody's going to do that, but it might be here until the American Red Cross can come here and decide, all right, do we need to set up a shelter, or are we going to work with people individually to solve their problems? Yes.
Did some work on this in my previous life before I retired.
Could you speak up, sir?
Sure, did some work on this in my previous life before I retired. I was Director of Social Services. At that point, we were looking at a number of things. One point, in terms of animals, because everybody cares about them, and you're not going to get people to leave if they can't take them. We met with the then shelter director and the Humane Society. They were very cooperative, mutual aid, what can we put up and how to vouchsafe. Getting them there is a separate issue, but if they can get to a shelter, they can presumably get by the shelter there. So that's one possible solution to that. In terms of a shelter out here, at that time, Locust Grove Middle School was designated to become possibly a shelter. And if that's the case, that's as close or closer than this building is for some people in the lake.
It is still designated as a shelter. The question is, are you going to staff up a shelter, or are you going to deal with families on an individual basis? If I'm talking about a mass evacuation, then I need to think about a shelter. If I'm talking about dealing with a dozen families, I'm not sure that I necessarily need to set up a shelter.
People are shelter adverse. They don't like to go to shelters and sleep with a bunch of people, and they will try to manage at home. And they should. And one of the important things we can do, as Leah's standing here talking about what the county is going to do for you, it's about what you could do for yourself. I don't know how many people go to Food Lion the night before the big storm, but if you've observed that phenomenon, right, you got people who are allergic to dairy products stocking up on milk. I don't know why. But that's what they do in an emergency. So there are lists that are published by the health department, we work with them, that tell you what you need to have around you. The other thing is, folks, we're Americans, know who lives around you, know who's vulnerable. Because like when the derecho hit, you didn't have a whole lot going for you, it was sudden, and you can tell in terms of affordability and stuff, we're not equipped, we don't have the resources in the county to take care of a wide number of individual folks. You got to be able to look out for yourself and your neighbor in an emergency until they can get here. We are not prone to great emergencies in Central Virginia. We had a tremor out of Louisa one time. If Orange County is involved, given our location, it means that a great area of the state is involved, and the resources of the American Red Cross, et cetera, are going to be stretched. We saw this in Katrina, we saw this in Houston, we saw this in Florida. Don't think it's going to be any different in Virginia. There are plans, for example, that if there's an emergency in DC, the Pentagon, 9/11, those people are going to head south, some of them. You can't get out of Washington, D.C. at the end of the business day. Right? What a mess is that going to be? But that's part of the plan. Whether it works or not is a separate issue. The East Coast is designed to flow west. In the case of Norfolk, flooding, etc., they will be evacuated, and they're going to be headed our way. And so the shelter operations become a big deal. This plan piggybacks on the North Anna power plant. We have always had to have the Nuclear Regulatory Commission have a plan, which we review periodically. We went through the drills, tabletop and otherwise, to make sure that if that happens, because we're out of the radius, that's liable to be involved, but the people who are in that radius, they're going to have to come out. And some of them, a lot of them, are going to be headed towards Orange County, and so we have to be prepared for that. But please look at self-sufficiency. Look at your neighbor, et cetera. Find out who's vulnerable and how you can help them in an emergency. And a lot of times, that's how it works. County can do what the county can do, but we as individuals can do a whole lot for ourselves and for each other if we think about it and do a little bit of planning ahead of time. Can't
But
recommend that highly enough.
There's a big problem, like around me, 10 of the houses that are around me are only weekenders.
One of the things that FEMA is working with is developing a community-based pre-disaster planning. And this is for mitigation, for areas that have earthquakes. Are all the bookshelves bolted to the wall? I mean, that's simply simple as that. Because if you have an earthquake and a bookshelf falls on you, you've now augmented it. But there's a whole range of different things that people can do. Even such things as bolting the water heater so it doesn't fall over. And there are different kinds of things, and local communities can sit down and think of, all right, how can we, what are the logical problems that we would have here in Lake of the Woods or in Orange County? What are the kinds of problems we would have? Loss of power, okay. What can we do about that? Well, I don't know. There are, know who needs electrical power to survive. Because our focus from the county is going to be making sure that people stay alive. So if you're cold and you probably are going to be pretty low on the priority list because there's somebody who needs power to keep their oxygen going. Yeah. That's where you're going to put the priorities. And knowing that, it comes from the Rave Alert system. But there are different ways of doing that. Again, county's going to be focusing on fighting the casualty. If we make an evacuation, we use school buses to bring everybody out. If you've got transportation problems, but as I say, most people, that's why 80–90% of them are going to take care of themselves. We got a casualty coming, we got a hurricane, make sure your gas tank's full, make sure you got more milk than you need. Make sure your cell phone is charged. All things like that that you can do to take care of yourself. Yes?
Do you have people identified that can interpret for people who don't speak English or Spanish?
I don't think so. Yeah, the question was, do we have people who, are, you know, I carry a little thing on my rescue duty, a little series of cards that speak to Spanish, and so I say, okay, you know, how bad is the pain? And I got, you know, 10 circles there with a smile at one end and a frown at the other end. You know, how bad's your pain? You know, and where does your pain, you know, and a couple of Spanish words so that I can deal with it. They make these cards, and I carry one around in case I run into somebody who can't speak English. I've had that happen to me once, but fortunately the guy's supervisor came with us on the ambulance so he could interpret for me. Yes.
How many need to go out and buy a sleeping bag? Come on, raise your hand, be honest. You all have sleeping bags? Oh, I used to have one.
I would encourage Lowlinc as an organization to make sure that all their members have filled out the Rave Alert system. Whether they need any kind of assistance or not, I would encourage the church, which is represented here today, and any other organizations to make sure that everybody has this filled out, if for no other reason to make sure that you are on the receiving end of any emergency notification.
Why don't you write an article about that?
I have done that in the past.
Well, I'm
Probably
sorry I
time to
missed
do it again, maybe. I'll leave these over here and you can pick them up on the way out. Yes.
Does the Rave Alert, the people, whoever manages that, do they coordinate with the, let me think, the electric company knows who needs power for oxygen because they get notified by the oxygen companies. And somebody notifies the, excuse me, the rescue squad for some special cases. So do they coordinate with them?
I don't think they coordinate with the electric company. What we do is we say, okay, in a Rave Alert, I can call up the Rave Alert system and say, everybody in this circle here, I want to know them, anybody who has mobility problems.
But that changes. And that changes, and if you suddenly get oxygen, you're
That's
not,
right, it does change.
you're not
And the fact
necessarily
is, the
gonna
county
think
can't
about
keep that up if you don't
Right.
keep it up yourself. I mean, the Rave Alert Smart 911 system, they automatically send out a message to you about every 6 months saying, check it to make sure it's updated.
Lee, on behalf of Lowlinc, we thank you very much for coming to the meeting with us today. It was very informative.